So I started playing through Nier Automata again, full clean playthrough. I have done ending E before, and while I'm fully aware that there are many points in this game that warrant a pretty extensive analysis, the one that isn't piquing an interest for me, having just got past it again, is the amusement park battle with Simone. So let's take a look why I felt necessary to talk about this. But of course first, as per usual, some background info for the purpose of informing the uninitiated and for stretching the length of the video out. Nier Automata takes place on an Earth in the far future where all of humanity has fled from the planet due to an alien invasion and are now living on the moon. In order to fight off the aliens, they use androids who are perfect facsimiles to humanity, including having emotions and seemingly fetishes. In turn, the aliens use robots as their proxies for fighting the war. 2B and 9S are part of the Euro, the elite androids warriors, and are sent to Earth in order to assist the standard resistance androids in fighting off the robots. Their assignments bring them to an old amusement park which is home to Simone, a giant robot who resembles an opera singer. And for your first playthrough, that's as much as can be derived. In fact, you don't even know it's called Simone in the first playthrough. As far as you can tell from plotline A, it's just a pretty imposing looking boss themed appropriately for the location, that being the theatre section of the amusement park. And so the encounter seems pretty incidental, basically just in keeping with the JRPG trend of one member of a list of bosses who tie to the concept of the part of the game they're in, but not really having a relation to the overarching plot. But then things begin to change when running through plotline B. You now run through the same points as A, but through the lens of 9S, who possesses hacking abilities, and so is able to divine greater insights into the thought processes of these robots that you encounter. It is here that we discover the name Simone, but not only that, we also get an insight into how she became what she is and provide a justification for why she held a vindictive, hateful reign over the amusement park, as well as why there's a collection of murdered androids not only held within her lair, but adorning her dress. After defeating her in this beeline, we discover that she was once a standard-looking robot who fell in love with another but was rejected. Immediately she jumped to thinking that in order to gain his affection, she must make herself more beautiful. As a result, she begins to salvage parts in order to augment herself, reaching the point of murdering other robots in order to achieve what she believed to be the ideal beauty. However, despite her efforts, she remains unable to gain his affection and so locks herself away to live with her bitterness, and has even spread this to create a gloomy pall over the entire amusement park. It's a brilliant scenario of taking something which seems like it's pretty innocuous and incidental and giving it a much greater meaning in retrospect. And it is even further heightened in giving meaning after getting through the third playthrough and the whole theming becomes apparent. Simone is a microcosm of the tragedy suffered by the parties within this world. They all live under an illusion of having free will, but the choices they make, the actions they carry out, are choices they make completely of their own autonomy and rational thinking, and they believe themselves to be in control of their past and their emotions. But this autonomy isn't an illusion. They are driven by programming through all their behaviors. They can't control their emotions, they don't even understand what they are or where they come from. They may be able to suppress them, but they cannot manage them. And this oppression is also dangerous. They build up manifesting into a psychosis that leaves them behaving extremely unstably. Simone sums this up perfectly. She acted on what she believed to be her best interest. She believed that she had a true affection, and she believed that she was acting in a rational means to achieve what she wanted. And as a result, when she fails, she held a toxic bitterness to everything around her. This of course extends to the androids, who already have naturally been predetermined to be the enemy, but who also have the added factor that they have been made to match the image of their creators, humans. The robots, however, have not been given the same gift, and this serves as a point of animosity. Beings normally view their creators as something of beauty and splendor. It is something that we've seen in our own ways. Even the Greeks, who viewed theirs as capricious psychopaths, still portrayed them as beautiful. One would assume that these automatons, who have been granted all the same trappings of humanity in terms of cognitive function, would follow the same standard, and so not possessing this endowment will create a greater hatred to those who are. The robots genuinely believe that consuming an android will grant them beauty. But again, they do not possess the control that they are fooled into believing that they do. Their actions are all manipulated, and the functions which instigate them predetermined by a power out of their reach. But despite the long diatribe, this video wasn't actually made to talk about Nier's examination of free will and existentialism. If I was, I would go on about how you as the player, or coordinator if I may call back to an earlier statement, serve as a dictator and inhibitor of the free will of the playable characters. Did 2B send 6-0 a desert flower because she genuinely felt an amiable connection with her, or because I made her do it? And then you can stretch it to, did I do it because I care for any of them, or because gaming has trained me to do things because it gives me rewards? But I said we won't be doing that, so let's get going to what we actually are doing. A beautiful song is probably the most famous part of what is truly a brilliant soundtrack. While not necessarily my favourite, it probably does epitomise it the best. It starts with a loud surge which sets you up for an intense battle against an imposing foe, and then keeps a good cadence to keep you pushing through the fight. It succeeds in fulfilling the criteria of a good boss fight piece. But again, it goes just beyond these mere technical aspects. Like a fair number of pieces in the Nier Automata soundtrack, Beautiful Song has lyrics. The lyrics are unintelligible as they are written in Chaos language, a language created specifically for the game and especially the music, created by distorting the languages of our current time. An advantage of this from a composing point of view is that it removes one of the limitations that one can come across when writing with lyrics. The fact that the way words are pronounced can place restrictions on the directions you can take melody to. However, if you are artificially constructing the words yourself, you can then make it to fit with whatever music construction you would like. On another technical note, Yoko Taro, the director and writer, has said that they chose to use it as they believe that the use of understandable lyrics would cause players to be distracted, and so the use of a made-up language would serve only for the background atmosphere. And despite the second point being a technical one, it also plays well into the narrative aspect. I realize the statement I'm about to make is very subjective, but there's definitely some truth to the desire for the soundtrack to be in the background. While I do believe a good soundtrack is highly important to creating a good experience with the ability to heighten an average game, as well as the ability to bring down a good one, at the end of the day it is a more peripheral aspect, falling behind visuals and gameplay. Again, I realize that it's subjective, but I would hope it's not too far-fetched a claim to make that just saying gameplay is a central feature of a video game. At least the first time that you play through, you are generally focused on the challenge at hand. Obviously you notice the music and you might bop to it as well, but you don't analyze and pick up every little detail genuinely. But then on your second and third playthroughs you begin to analyze these details more. You begin to notice the little touches, and this is where a technical matter moves to becoming a narrative one. Assuming of course in this case that you actually did enjoy the first playthrough and aren't just doing it because you know you need 3 playthroughs to understand the full story and it better be bloody worth it after all of this. As I said earlier, you only found out about Simone's past when running through the B plot line, the point by which you might be sucking in these finer points. Added to it being the second playthrough, it's slowly parceled to you throughout the fight and only getting the full picture by the end of it. And so now you might start to realize that this beautiful song is actually detailing the events of Simone's past. Throughout this battle, she is singing us her life story. The more sweetest melodic singing parts, representing her feelings when finding herself in love, and then breaking to the more strained and aggressive vocals depicting the anguish and heartbreak experienced upon rejection. So what initially starts out as just a brilliant accompaniment to a boss fight transforms into a narrator of not just an individual story, but the anguish of all the dwellers in this world. And this is a feature of Nier Automata's soundtrack as a whole. It does a great job of telling the tales of the locations that we visit, and as well as the escalation and progression throughout the narrative. We begin the game with alien manifestation, ratcheting up the tension as we involve in an all-out assault in the midst of what has been an unending war. This part culminating with the 2 protagonists, thus far, self-destructing.
The honor was mine.
And so upon return to Earth with new bodies and the little bit of relationship between 9S and 2B having been destroyed, it's now new beginnings, very appropriately correlated with rays of light. However, upon returning to this location later after much plot development, we are treated to a different sounding variation, indicating the passage of time through shade. We also have a very well suiting theme for the desert, but as good as it is, it's probably a little bit of a cheat to just use a kind of Arabic sounding theme to associate with deserts. Back to the amusement park. Its theme is another brilliant matching with the scenery that we are placed in, a broken and forgotten home to what was once a place of joy and, well, amusement. But that is now a melancholy place subdued by an oppressive atmosphere. And so we are treated to a piece which is tinged with the whimsy associated with Disney, but also holds a level of sadness and melancholy. Now this has all been associated with areas of degraded or deprived landscape. Yes, the city ruins are slowly being overcome by nature growing again, but it is still a place of ruination and degradation. It is only once you enter the forest that you finally see a place where nature, well, a part of nature that we associate with pleasantness, existing uninhibited. And again, there was a perfect accompaniment, starting out rather muted as we enter into a new unknown area and gradually expanding as we discover more of this land. However, throughout this whole time there's an air of mystery, and once it breaks into the chanting we have added the feelings of arriving upon a forgotten kingdom isolated for a long time. So what was the point of all of this? Well, apart from just waxing on about Neo Thomas' soundtrack, it's also harping on about an art that I feel we have lost in the modern day. The art of narration through music. It makes sense that a beautiful song tells a story, since the song used to be what we called the telling of a story. Obviously that has changed a lot over the years, but it still exists through things like rock operas, musicals, and concept albums. But until recently it was a very key factor of gaming. Back before voice acting became standard for every game, music had a much bigger role to play. With no voices to emote with, and also very limited animations, the key contributor to the emotions the scene were meant to convey was music. I know music has always been used for the purposes of manipulating emotions, but these soundtracks could encapsulate everything about their world. Probably the master of this was Nobuo Uematsu in the Final Fantasy games, someone with the ability to write a character theme which would capture in detail every aspect of a character. Likewise, he could do the same with locations which also could receive the same treatment. And of course, we mustn't forget his ability to write battle themes which will never grow tired despite being heard over and over and over again. Now, another factor of these technological limitations was brought about by the limitations of the sound cards of the time. Generally, you couldn't use big orchestral soundtracks because of it, since they just wouldn't sound very good if you tried to. As a result, there would also need to be a more innovative use of different styles and instruments. But now, as technology has advanced, there's the capability to include higher quality music alongside a move towards games being more cinematic as well. And I feel this has kind of led to soundtracks being more generic, kind of standard, put in some kind of orchestral backing and then you're good to go. Now, I'm definitely not saying these soundtracks are bad, in fact they're usually good. And I'm also not going to be one of those, it was much better in the past when we could only pump out one tone kind of people. It's just that soundtracks seem to have reached a similar point that graphics has. That it's a standard level of good quality, but it's become rare and rare to have those that stand out and innovate. It's not as common for soundtracks to have that atmosphere world capturing ability that they once did. There's now also a common thing of inserting licensed music, which is very unlikely to be able to match up exactly with what you're portraying, being written in complete isolation, taking no consideration of a media pitch which probably didn't even exist when it was composed. Again, a use of a licensed song can actually enhance an experiment, but it can also come across as a little bit lazy, and still doesn't match up to those that are actually purposely written for the game itself. I haven't really got a way to end this since it's more of just a self-righteous rant, but I suppose I will say again, just like it's fine for media to be fun and doesn't need to have some highly in-depth meaning, you also don't need soundtracks to be that intensely woven a story, but it is nice when they do so. I invite anyone who's watching this to tell me about maybe modern soundtracks which are good and do this, because I'm definitely never going to be opposed to learning about new good music, because why don't we just celebrate those that do things well?